Well, I'm a little peeved today. Said 25th of May, 2021. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, Pacific Standard Time. It is Tuesday. Politics has a way of bringing out our anger and our ire and our rage, our frustration, our confusion, our arrogance and indifference and ignorance at the same time. It also tries to bring out the hope, and unfortunately, that usually gets its ass kicked left and right, especially when you have politicians who keep bringing up horrific situations and comparing it to a current situation we got right now with the pandemic coming to a close, hopefully. A rising star out there looking to get a name associated with a fallen 45th. Actually, there's two competing, or several major stars out there trying to kiss the corporate and presidential kiss-ass ring there. This one brings out a Holocaust related to the masks that one wears. How does that work? Seriously, how does that work? You're wearing a mask and that labels you as a Jew? Is this is how her thinking's going at this point? And yeah, you did hear me say, or I'm not going to dignify myself to use the initials or the name because you already know who the person is. You've already heard so much coming out in the news these days. And when I have somebody saying that, and you have the Auschwitz Memorial from Poland biting back to the United States in a political statement at this point over here. Apparently, the persons who are trying to climb up the golden ladder to become the golden persons to perch upon the elitism do not care how many people they stomp because they're in it for their own damn ego. Regardless of what kind of damage and people they've hurt in the process, it doesn't matter. Because for them, everything that matters is they're getting their way and we're allowing it to happen. Auschwitz sent out a strong letter, as I said before, in condemnation regarding the politics and health concerns related to a tragedy that happened by a madman a long time ago. If people have forgotten their history for so long, the children, the grandchildren, and the great great grandchildren of those related to the perished do not let people forget about this because the stories have to live on about the atrocities that happened. Much like we've already had some atrocities happening in our own country's history of what we've done to our own civilians, to our own soldiers, and testing for something this or testing for something that, and then having a whole issue getting whitewashed. So I know conspiracy nut jobs are going to go crazy over that one, but when it's proven true, then it's not exactly a conspiracy nut, is it? But how do you equate using a mask in a connection to a Holocaust that happened created by a madman? How does that work? We had a pandemic kicking our ass left and right. We had to have ways of dealing with this damn thing. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were going by baby steps at this point over here, and people are bitching and griping about it, trying to get the political foothold left and right so they can show themselves as the glorious saviors. It reminds me too much of watching the damn Ten Commandments so many damn times with Burt Lancaster in it. Or is it no, Charlton Heston, actually. Charlton Heston at that point. Trying to get rid of this one Dathan, the Jewish overseer, who had high hopes of being a pharaoh in himself. He gets himself struck down by the power of God at the end of the film. In biblical history, it didn't happen. But the example is somebody's achieving that much power left and right and wants that and doesn't know how to get rid of it, he's going to get their ass kicked. Case in point, Washington Post was reporting that there was a grand jury convened in New York. They're doing a criminal probe into Trump and his dealings and his holdings. More likely in his family too. So if they happen to find any wrongdoing, and they have to bring that out to the public, then that's going to be a hell of a scandal right there, isn't it? Politicians are going to have to move very fast and move whatever kind of political clout they've got left with the underworld in order to get their savior protected, or their godfather, or to call him the Don the Con. But that's how it's being right now, isn't it? Don the Con. But of course, when you're dealing with politicians who are kissing corporate ass left and right, it's not corporate ass. It's kissing their ring left and right. They want to show and prove themselves that they are most loyal. And they're going to get the most people out of it. They're going to get how many supporters and how much money to build their street creds up. It seems there is a political power struggle going on within the so-called GOP, but it's now the Trump party. I no longer call it a GOP because it no longer exists. If those in the GOP actually consider themselves as part of the old grand old party, forget it. You guys have already been replaced by the Trumplicants. You're going to have to deal with it. Just like the rest of us had to deal with it. But you're going to be going along with the damn thing, so guess what? You get to be marked up by history on this shit. Having someone using a horrific event as a political stepping stone, that doesn't show any brilliance in there. It only shows the lack of humanity. And they don't care. Now, my question is to this group or this individual who seems to be using a tragedy for their own political stepping stones, just how much of a soul do you have left? Or do you have any? And do you dare call yourselves a believer or follower of a religion or a deity? And if you do, are you doing this in the name of that deity? And then come up with the other question again, or this other follow-up here. How does that deity look to you, or look at you, when you're doing this in a name, and you're harming those in its name, his or hers? I am not saying which particular religions are getting nailed left and right at this point over here. I am saying that the religious community, the Jewish community, is getting their ass kicked. Of course, you can call them religion, but I also call them a race. And it was a race that was getting exterminated, along with everybody else. Those who supported them, those who didn't support them, didn't matter if they supported them or not, they can still get erased. Because that's how evil is. They didn't give a shit. So right now we've got that happening in the United States Congress happening. We have the turtles still hiding in their shells, not wanting to do a damn thing about it, saying, well, it's the other side's problem now, it's not ours. Yeah, well, it's going to be your problem eventually. Or you're just not looking at the damn problem, don't give a shit. And in another chamber, they're going to have a religious war if they're not careful in there. But we're saying it, but they're not going to have it, because everyone else is going to be holding their damn collective breath over this situation. Meanwhile, the mouth continues to build upon street cred and more finances at this point. I'm sure this mouth is very adept in what she's doing. Is it considered right? Well, to her it's moral. So to her it's right. It's righteous. Righteous in her indignation. According to history and everybody else has suffered under the Nazi regime. It's morally, it's inhuman, it's incomprehensible, it's inconceivable. But unfortunately, it happens all the damn time. Seeing all those damn protests happening. Not to mention the beatings going on these days. These days, shit, we've had them for God knows how long. I try to put things into a global perspective, and then I have to put them down into a local perspective for people to understand. I try to make them see something in all of my musings and wonderings and observations at this point over here. I keep telling these grand folks on my videos that I am not an expert in a damn thing. I'm just a student going through college right now. But I've seen too damn much in my 50 some odd plus years. I've read, I've heard, I've experienced. Doesn't make me the expert, it just makes me scarred up. Having that much so-called wisdom doesn't help much these days, especially for those who are not willing enough to apply any of it. If they happen to hear it, they're not being applied. They don't care. That's what's going on. There's no moral outrage in the streets. None. There's no demonstrations except if a cop murders a black person. Any way, shape, or form. Gets even worse is when the cops get they win, and the community loses. And the community loses its mind. But in the case of George Floyd's former officer Chauvin, got his day in court, got his ass reamed. He's got to be awaiting what kind of sentence he's going to get. And the other officers that were with him in George Floyd's murder, they're going through the trial right now as it is. Their own trials. So now they got to worry about their own damn ass. But it's still ongoing. It's still continuing. But what I don't see is a moral outrage concerning about all this damn racism shit. At least not enough anyway, unless we're talking about blue lies and black lies and everything else going on. But concerning about the Jewish nation at this point over here, no, the thing we're dealing with right now is people going over to another person and beating the shit out of one person because they may or may not be Jewish. Where's the moral outrage there? I hear the politicians talking about shit. I'm hearing the commentators talking about crap. Where's the public outcry? If it's not a black person, doesn't matter, does it? See, that's the thing I don't even get either. Where's the lack of humanity at this point over here, regardless? We want to care for the law enforcement. Fine. We want to care for the right law enforcement. Fine. What's considered the right law enforcement these days? What's considered the right power these days? Or the right race? Or the right skin color? Or belief? Or worship? Where's the moral outrage? If a Jewish person happens to get nailed by non-Jewish people, or if a Palestinian or a descendant of a Palestinian immigrant gets their ass kicked by an Israeli in the United States at a restaurant, or let alone being chased until I try to find some place to be safe. It gets me more and more sick to death talking about shit like this, but we're going to have to keep talking about it more and more until it makes you really rich, or you're just going to be turning everything else off like everybody else has. What am I asking for you to do? I'm not asking anything. I'm not saying anything. I'm not telling anything. You should already know. I don't have to motivate your ass. You already know what's going on. It's what you need to do in your own little community at this point over here that builds upon foundations in order to build something to get this shit stopped. It's bad enough when we see this shit happening in the Middle East as we're watching news these days of Hamas and Israel having a tenuous ceasefire. The Palestinians versus the Israelis. The United States wants to have good relations with both of them. But then when we keep flip-flopping, mostly staying with Israel at this point over here, we keep forgetting that there are other victims around that are not directly involved in the conflicts, but are still involved with the conflicts. I'm not talking about enemy combatants either. I'm talking about the innocents who are stuck in the middle. In New York this past week, a group of thugs were rolling around looking for someone to thump on. And they're asking people left and right, are they Jewish? The right answer, you may or may not survive it. The wrong answer, you get thumped on. I'm not going to say it's a damn shame. We already know it's a damn shame. We already know what the hell's going on at this point over here. And the problem is, this shit's going on. Turn on the news and we're already seeing this damn shit happening these days. What we're not seeing is enough outrage, enough political change happening. Because there's not enough of the outrage. It's been ongoing for centuries. Even when they came over here. One form or another, they came over here. And what surprises me, how come we didn't get the outrage from every other kind of race, color, and creed? I don't know. I guess maybe not enough buttons were pushed. You folks may think it's funny until you're on the receiving end of it. Racism in any form is uglier than hell. But in one particular video, I kept trying to say something that makes it hard as hell. There were questions that Wolf Blitzer and Dana Bash were doing on CNN, asking themselves, how can this happen? And Dana Bash was almost speechless for a couple of seconds. And I could answer a question for her. And I would say it, First Amendment. And both would probably look at me very weirdly. I can say this to both Wolf Blitzer and Dana Bash over at CNN. And to those other media outlets. The First Amendment allows us to a point of saying whatever we have on our mind without government recrimination. Except for the fact if we've already passed certain laws regarding hate speech throughout the decades. I tried to make clear in another video that in Skokie versus the American Nazi Party, Skokie lost in the Supreme Court because they upheld the First Amendment for everybody, including for the Nazi Party. But there was technicalities that they couldn't get past, such as where and when to have their hate speech at, which almost made them nullified, almost. But they did get their point across. It's up to the states to decide where these things should be allowed and not allowed. Because technically speaking, the government should not be involving themselves in the First Amendment rights. But they're going to have to be. And this is the tenuous problem. And every legal scholar out there and every academia And every lawyer should be screaming their heads off on this damn shit. If we happen to mutilate or touch the First Amendment in any way, shape, or form, even try to limit a damn thing, we're going to have our rights emasculated one way or another. And looking how people react to the Second Amendment rights would almost give us surely that indication what we're going to be facing regarding the First Amendment rights. But we've got no choice now, do we? The hardest, ugliest thing for us to do is to face that opposition, the most extreme, polar opposite. Because unfortunately, because of our First Amendment rights that we have, they guarantee it. They guarantee it. But the consequences afterwards, they don't guarantee. You can have the right to say something in a movie theater, but if it's going to be causing problems or consequences, you're going to be up shit creek on that one. For example, the proverbial example they use is I know I've used it twice, didn't I, that word? Example. Fire. Can't yell it in the theaters. It's against the law. Because it causes public panic. A disturbance of the peace. And they would almost consider it a damn felony. Our First Amendment right, because it causes issues. And how long did they have this going on in the books? Fighting it out left and right until they actually have it on the books where you can't yell fire in a theater. Well, this is what we're dealing with right now, folks. If you're looking at the examples I'm trying to lay out to you. So all this political hate speech that's going on. Yes, it was uglier than shit. It is also protected under the First Amendment. Those who came to the country looking for the theoretical freedom to say or do whatever they want get pissed off enough because we have limitations being built upon them. We give a semblance of an almost actual freedom because we know what the consequences will be. And if we actually had the absolute freedom, we know the consequences are a hell of a lot worse. It sucks studying all this stuff, but in Ephesians, or actually Ecclesiastics, chapter 1, and they got a lot of verses, I think 1 through 18 on that one. They were dealing with concerning about knowledge. He increases knowledge, increases sorrow, basically. And the more information I have concerning about the human behavior and human history at this point over here, I keep thinking we should have been wiped out a hell of a long time ago because we don't know our ass from a hot rock. It doesn't help now because we have to work extra harder in trying to get past all of our damn crap we're throwing out there in the first place. We have to be more diligent, educational, but we also have to be, and I hate to say this, because I'm going to be causing part of this shit. But you know where it's coming from. You know where it's going. You can see where exactly it's leading to for me saying it. So should I say it or should I not say it? I'm still protected by the First Amendment rights. However, dealing with private entities at this point over here, that would be causing more issues with the corporate and the community guidelines. And therefore, I would be considered a bad guy for expressing something heinous in retaliation to something heinous. Even words become our worst nightmare right now. Our own words being thrown back at us in recordings, and audio and visual. Keep this in mind every time you keep thinking about the hate speech. When you want to support somebody who's wanting to assault somebody in one way or another, just think of how it's going to be for you on all sides. You're probably confused about all of this damn thing. It's never been more clear on how ugly hate speech can be and how legality is just as bad. It's a double-edged sword we've got. And we're being cut by both sides of it. Us handling the sword and us using the sword. Theoretically speaking. Hypothetically speaking. Because our own words and deeds have a way of coming back and haunting us. It's like acid reflux. There's only so much Tums and so much milk that you can put in your stomach before you get the reaction that you didn't want in the first place. Think about all this.